Hello and welcome to another important and most contemporary issue, revival of Cold War. This topic comes under General Studies paper 2 of Civil Service Examination mains under the section International Relations. Some aspects of this session could be covered under General Studies paper 1 of Civil Service Examination under the topic World History. Further, even some aspects could be covered under the prelims paper events of international importance and under world geography. In this session, the major objectives are definition of Cold War. We will try to see the rise of China, the philosophers behind the Chinese rise, and signals to say Cold War 2.0 or revival of Cold War. Further, we will take some way forward points, particularly with respect to India's. Next, the most important element of our session, that is, what do you mean by Cold War is about? Cold War is an ideological conflict between two blocks. One is Western Bloc, another is Eastern Bloc. Western Bloc aims to promote democracy. Western Bloc aims to promote democracy, which aims to promote democracy and promote capitalist economy, whereas Eastern Bloc aims to promote communism with socialist economic trends. Both started to have proxy wars and even had alliances to have these proxy wars. It all begins with the announcement of policy of containment in the year 1945. Policy of containment by Harry S. Truman under a very famous Truman Doctrine. It ended in 1991 with the disintegration of USSR into 15 republics. And both had their own collective security. For example, in the year 1948, we have Washington Convention, which led to formation of North Atlantic Treaty Organization. Further, we also had Warsaw Pact. Further, we will try to see the arenas of Cold War, because as I told you earlier, it is a proxy war, and it was a proxy war between two different entities. For example, if you take Korean crisis, where you can find South Korea and North Korea fighting each other. However, we can see North Korea was backed by USA and South Korea was backed by USSR. Let us take one more theatre of Cold War, that is Vietnam. In this, North Vietnam was supported by USSR and South Vietnam supported by USA. So this is how this Cold War started to spread. You can ask me, sir, why these newly independent countries associated with blocks, or you can say Western Bloc or Eastern Bloc. These newly independent countries need military assistance at that time, need economic power or technology to development, and also some kind of security aspects. Whereas blocks need newly independent countries to expand their ideology, to expand their markets, and most importantly to conduct spying. So this is how it was started to expand. Moving further, the fields of Cold War, you can find space. One side, USSR sent Laika and even the great Yuri Gagarin into the space. The other side you have Apollo mission, which sent Neil Armstrong and Aldrin Buzz to the moon. It also expanded nuclear race and a series of developments in nuclear weapons. Particularly, the stockpile was raised between USA and USSR, and even both had agreed to SALT treaty, START treaty to reduce, even also INF treaty, which was in news because in the last tenure of Donald Trump sir withdraws from INF treaty. And even sports also, you can find intensified competition between two blocks, that is West Bloc and Eastern Bloc. It was well witnessed in the movie Brothers in South India. So this is how the Cold War started to expand. However, now we will try to, after getting an opinion or understanding about Cold War in the world history, Let us try to understand how Cold War revived. It all begins with the rise of China. So how China started to rise? It may be very fascinating to note that 1945, when China announced itself as a People's Republic of China, as a communist China, it was blocked by West countries. However, after 1971, we witness integration of China into the global politics. How these things started to emerge? Thanks to USA itself, because because it is noted in the book New Cold War. It is noted in the book New Cold War by Sanjay Baru and Rahul Sharma. They mentioned in that book, in one of essays, they mentioned that it's the Henry Kissinger. It's the Henry Kissinger who supported rise of China. He helped China in a way to counter Russia at that time. He helped China in integrating China with the WTO, expansion of expansion of USA investors into China, like that. Excuse me. So in that way, they started to focus. Another way, USA global hegemonic power, also a kind of unfortunate thing for USA's rise. Why? Because during that time, USA not focused about its internal development, not focused about its innovation, USA not focused about its innovation and internal development and growth and development. It focused on thoughtless, mindless wars in NATO, with the NATO forces in Middle East, in Africa, in Afghanistan, so on and so forth. So USA doesn't cared about China for some time, and it purely trusted China for some time. And also later, USA even followed some kind of deglobalization trends. Trade wars is one example, and protectionism measures like imposing tariffs on commodities, and also as I mentioned earlier, involving in several wars, and particularly deglobalization trends with respect to Paris Agreement. You see, when USA left from Paris climate deal, it gave chance to China itself to accept Chinese leadership at that time. So here you need to understand this most important philosopher after Confucius is Yuan. So this Yuan is a person during the self-strengthening reforms or typing reforms in China, advised Chinese to westernize themselves, to modernize themselves in a way that they should counter Western forces, they should strengthen their modernity and scientific revolutions. And Feng Yuan, who inspired them to connect with the ancient roots of China. So both these people even today also very relevant to China. I noted this from Sam Saransar's book, How China Looks Old in India. In that he mentioned that for everything Chinese refer history. China will try to focus about the contemporary things from the history point of view. So this is how Chinese ideology works, not purely from the economic trends. Even their ideology also associated with these things. I referred these two books, very contemporary issues, and these two books far better provided very best inputs for us. So, and even this book I also mentioned you earlier itself. So the rise of China started with the rise of Chinese trade. Now wherever you see China had whatever country you see, China had trade surplus, and those countries which are trading with China will face trade deficit. Expansion of trade to different commodities, to say particularly from pharmaceuticals to electronic goods. Further, Chinese soft power. China is providing scholarships to Bhutan. China is providing disaster management mitigation strategies to Bangladesh, and even flood management with African countries. And of course, it is also providing small and medium scale development with Latin American countries. Further, the premier project of Xi Jinping government, Belt and Road Initiative. And this initiative expanded Chinese infrastructure projects. Of course, it is criticized as a debt trap, but still it is expanding. Very recently, China announced a Global Development Initiative and Global Security Initiative. And these two initiatives is to promote Chinese hegemony and Chinese way of development, Chinese way of growth. Further, during COVID-19 time, when global countries criticizing China for its late and lackadaisical approach, but at this time, China promoted vaccine diplomacy, providing free vaccines to the small and least developed countries. China offers loan line of credits at a cheaper rate and defense exports to other countries. For example, if you take Bangladesh, China is the largest defense exporter for Bangladesh. Of course, even to Nepal also. Pakistan is of course Chinese, considered to be Chinese territory. So moving further, control of critical technologies. Because when you see critical technologies, by mean critical technologies, here artificial intelligence, robotics, machine learning, quantum computers, supercomputers, China is leading the world. Example, you can take 5G. 5G test is mostly Huawei conducted in several countries. Of course, USA denied that entry also, but still it is the 5G test conducted by Huawei company itself. And also the control over rare earth metals. It was, I think, in diplomat and even economist papers widely published that Chinese control over rare earth metals is very problematic, because 80% of world's rare earth metals now controlled by China itself. The exports of this controlled by China itself. Next, advanced weaponry, and it was well noted in the recent book of Ashley Tillis in his book The Rising Asymmetries, Striking Asymmetries, and he mentioned that this nuclear weapons, particularly thermonuclear weapons, are rising. And it is also mentioned by Pentagon reports. Pentagon reports mentioned that Chinese Navy is the largest navy in world right now. So they rise in navy power very silently and very advanced manner. Of course, now issues reach space also. For example, as I told you, they are now moving towards developing their own space station, opposing USA or NASA-led International Space Station. Okay, so Tiangong is one space station they are aiming to create it. Very recently, we have crash of Long March 5B, which is also associated with this Tiangong. Understood? So you can see that it is also rising into the space. They are now giving competition to ISS, International Space Station, which is led by 5 countries. To name, UK and even USA, Japan, Canada, and Russia. And Russia want to exit from its, very recently it announced they want to exit from ISS. Let us wait and see. So you can see that now Cold War is expanding. Now Cold War is expanding into different fields. So as I told you, all these things are very, very crucial for us to say Cold War is expanding. As it is expanding. Apart from that, the disputes, particularly the disputes with neighboring countries. China involved in disputes with neighboring countries, particularly those are allies of USA. You can see here, first and foremost one, so it is Senkaku dispute. It is Senkaku disputes with the Japan, or the recent aggressions against Taiwan. Okay, so you can also find these disputes and recent visit of US Speaker Nancy ma'am. That also led to a conflict and military aggression over the Taiwan. Further, the South China Sea. Once upon a time, all these countries are economically dependent on USA, but now they were replaced by China itself. Almost all the ASEAN countries are having very good ties with China in terms of economy. Of course, in defense point of view also, China is rising. And very recently, we have China-Myanmar industrial corridor also open, allowing Chinese into close to the Indian Ocean region. Further, China is investing a lot in developing infrastructure projects in all these countries. So UK it launched with the European Union, it launched 17 plus 1 strategy, okay, and like that it is rising, and maritime Silk Route is also expanding into several countries. Moving further, even with India, it also had the issue with respect to LAC. Of course, the disengagement is going from last 2 days, but still it is an issue. So one thing you can understand that continuously there are evidences to say expansion of China and Chinese soft power, Chinese control over critical technologies, and everything is going on. And what will happen, sir? So here I would like to quote here one important book, that is as I referred with you, Destined War. Can China and America escape from this Thucydides trap? What is this Thucydides trap is about? Try to understand. This Thucydides trap is so called the rise of Romans. The rise of Romans created fear among a kind of insecurity among Greeks. So this is very common even in history. For example, the rise of Germans created a fear with fear among Britons. So similarly, that should be avoided. That fear, that insecurity should be avoided, because according to Arun Maira, there will in power there will be a cumulative causation. A cumulative causation. What do you mean by this cumulative causation? The meaning is the people who are in power, the person or the groups or the people, the countries in the power, they will try to maintain it, and also they will resist to lose it. So the global hegemonic power USA will definitely feel this. And of course you will also find the new competitions like Artemis Accord to counter Chinese Chang'e 5. And to counter BRI, USA came with Blue Dot Network, and even further it now came with Indo-Pacific Economic Framework for Prosperity. Got it? So now you can understand that even USA also getting ready for the Cold War. So you can see this rise is going on. Both the countries are also working on it, and of course the alliances like Quad is also developing, and China is very critical of Quad. Even last year Chinese minister openly criticized Bangladesh. If it is willing to join in Quad, it will face some kind of implications. So this is what the going tensions between these countries, and what is the best way forward. One has to see the balance of power should be maintained. Balance of power should be maintained here. No aggression should be taken. Of course it is not in our hands, because it's balance of power meaning that the realist powers will take the advantage of situations. Further, India should secure its national interest. It should focus on its gain. For example, it should join with Quad, but it should get its economic development, its technological development. That is what India's Way book by S. Jayasankar also suggested. Alliances are important to strengthen our national interest, and India should focus on its domestic development by bringing some social reforms and long-term economic reforms to boost Indian economy and research and development. For example, we have today PLI schemes, wonderful opportunity to bring foreign technology. We should also promote research linked incentives also, because we need to focus on innovation a lot. Further, making alliances that is associating with Quad countries, getting its development, local development is important. And last but not least, one should stick towards Gujarat doctrine, the policy of non-interference. Okay, the policy of non-interference is most important thing. And also India should also maintain NAM kind of developments. India should also maintain NAM kind of 2.0 developments to protect the interest of least developed countries, particularly with respect to climate change, terrorism, and further maintaining disaster management and social development of the poor and least developed countries. So this is how they can work out. So it's in his latest book, Kevvn Rudd, the former Australian Prime Minister, mentioned that better they should understand each other, better the two, China and the USA, understand each other, and they should conceptualize a world which can have peaceful coexistence, work for global peace and prosperity for all. That's all for today. Thank you so much and namaste.